All Elite Wrestling comes back with yet another new pay-per-view, joining the 6 already slotted for this year, with a tribute to the late Antonio Inoki, Wrestle Dream 2023. The title itself sounds like a Japanese wrestling event, complete with a very 70s-esque theme. The lineup was stacked, featuring a clash between Zack Sabre Jr. and Bryan Danielson that fans expected to see a year and a half ago at the first Forbidden Door show, but was scrapped due to Danielson's concussion issues at the time. Did the show live up to the billing of ushering in a new era in AEW? Could Danielson and ZSJ perform a grappling wrestling match on a major pay-per-view in the year 2023? And just what surprises would the Seattle audience be in store for at this show? First of all, it has to be addressed the ongoing issue of AEW storytelling or booking, depending on how you look at it. Fans have expressed for a while now that the build to these pay-per-views have been lackluster, a trend I noticed before the first Forbidden Door, and one that I haven't seen much improvement from since. Many people have reasons they give for that, and I have my own that I'll get into at a later time. The point is, Wrestle Dream 2023 suffered from the same problems, and it is starting to show in the arena attendance. The show drew just over 6,000 people, and while that's not a bad showing at all, it's far less than AEW was used to up until this time last year, when most of the shows sold out. Some have said that following the departure of CM Punk that the company was going to take a hit in the numbers, and that seems to be the case. More on that later, but as for the show itself, Tony Khan's promotion once again proves that despite the builds not feeling as epic or as engaging as many would hope, the actual event beats just about anything put out by any wrestling company around the world today. Honestly, it's kind of criminal that all the negative discussion around AEW overshadows this amazing streak of fantastic pay-per-views that give the audience more than its money's worth. That's hard to say about any other pro wrestling company these days, including New Japan and WWE. I'd be remiss not to mention that the 0-hour pre-show had an amazing match between Claudio Castagnoli and longtime devotee of Inoki's, Josh Barnett. It was a bit of a warm-up for what we see later in the night, but on its own, Barnett and Castagnoli told a wonderful story about two legitimate tough guys testing their skills more than their ability to take a punch. The rest of the pre-show was typically throwaway matches, but once the show proper got started, AEW pushed the gas pedal down to the floor and didn't let up the entire night. From MJF actually defeating the Righteous and retaining the ROH Tag Team Championships in a handicap match, which for his brother Adam Cole than for himself, to Eddie Kingston and Katsuyori Shibata testing Strong Style versus King's Road Style in an American ring on a pay-per-view, to Julia Hart and Chris Statlander continuing an underappreciated string of good to great women's matches in AEW lately, this show felt like it was going to be another home run for All Elite Wrestling. That's not to say it didn't have its down moments. The 4-way tag match to determine the next challengers for the AEW World Tag Team Championships felt a bit underwhelming and too predictable, with the Young Bucks winning. That's a rare thing for AEW, honestly, and given that FTR defeated Aussie Open later in the night, it makes me wonder about the contract status of some wrestlers. As for that FTR Aussie Open match, while it wasn't anywhere near as good as the first one a year ago in my opinion, the match also suffered from fatigue. Like I said earlier, AEW put the pedal to the metal, but if you get on a roller coaster that's going 1,000 miles an hour, by the third hour of wind and leaves and bird shit slapping against your face, you need a bit of a breather. The crowd appreciated the talents of these two tag teams, but just didn't have the energy to give it the proper reaction it would have had on a different show. By far the highlight of the night, outside of the main event, was the match between Swerve Strickland and Hangman Adam Page. Ironically, it is also the match on the card with the most solid build towards it, and Strickland and Page made sure to deliver in the ring when it was time. I didn't know what to expect this match, but I did get that this is right feeling about halfway through that carried on through to the epic conclusion. Seattle is certainly Swerve's house, and Hangman played off that through the match, looking increasingly upset as the natives booed every little thing he did. Swerve got the win by cheating, which didn't matter at all. He had finally arrived in the main event level in AEW. with the crowd swinging their arms to Prince Nana's insanely over-the-top routine in a scene that I haven't seen in a wrestling crowd since fandangoing was a thing. Swerve Strickland soaked in what could only be described as a defining moment not only in his AEW career, but I dare say his wrestling career in general. I've been a fan of his since I saw him as Killshot in Lucha Underground, and to see him rise to this level is truly enjoyable. Ricky Starks and Wheeler Yuta had an okay match. It's to be noted, though, that at this point of the show, Jon Moxley and Jim Ross joined commentary, although you never know that JR or anyone else was on the commentary team, as Mox couldn't contain his excitement. You can tell the man genuinely loves effing professional wrestling, and while at times awkward, to listen to Moxley's passion and crass caveman sense of humor more than makes up for it. In fact, since Pat McAfee, I think he's the most entertaining color commentator that wrestling's had all year. Mox would stay over for the featured match between Sabre and Danielson. I have to say, unfortunately for me, I was feeling a bit of fatigue at this point and didn't fully embrace this match as I normally would have. I am a fan of Zack's style and have seen him work magic in New Japan for years now. Danielson obviously is one of the best of all time. This match did deliver. I just was exhausted at this point. It is also a testament to AEW for being able to set the expectations for this match going into it, so the fans wouldn't feel jaded and start chanting boring because no one was going to crash through a table or dive over the top rope every 3 minutes. No, this was a older than old school wrestling match that you may have seen in the 50s or 60s. The outcome I expected, as Danielson has claimed that this is his last year in wrestling. I think, though, that Zack made a great accounting for himself in front of an audience that typically would turn their nose up at his style. There's much being made about Danielson winning the match by a strike instead of a technical submission, which seems to be the impetus for a rematch at some time in the future, either in the UK or Japan. While I'd assume a rematch with Kazuchika Okada would be the situation for Wrestle Kingdom next January, I'm now wondering if might be a match with Zack. Time will tell. Both have motivations, as Zack called bullocks on Danielson winning from a strike, and Danielson, even though he won, had doubts that he was actually the best technical wrestler, or proved it. So there you go. This was followed by a 6-man tag match between the Don Callis family of Will Ospreay, Konosuke Takeshita, and Sammy Guevara against the unlikely combination of Chris Jericho and the Golden Lovers, Kenny Omega and Kota Ibushi, respectively. It is crazy to think now that Ibushi and Omega are considered old wrestlers, taking on a trio of 30 and unders, and that would be the theme of the match. Even though Ibushi's angle for this match was him being laid out by Takeshita with a kettlebell, you wouldn't know it from the first few minutes of the match, as he seemed to be more giddy in talking to the fans and thanking Jericho every 30 seconds. That's according to the Ocho from the post-media scrum. While I did expect perhaps some sort of setup between Omega and Ospreay, maybe leading to a third match at Wrestle Kingdom since we're only 3 months away, and that might likely be Ospreay's last big match in New Japan before we all expect him to be signing with AEW next year, we didn't get that. The focus was on Sammy Guevara finally getting the pin over Chris Jericho. Well, at least the Olden Lovers can go back to their hotel room afterward and randomly find out that MTV has been using Ibushi's infamous fireworks footage on one of their shows. Once we get to the main event, I felt a bit of energy pick back up, and given the emotional entrance of Darby Allin as he headed to the 2 out of 3 falls match against the TNT champion Christian Cage, I have to say that Wayne hugging Darby made me feel a little bit uneasy. I immediately feared what in the hell this man was going to do in this match, and hopefully he wasn't going to hurt himself. I mean, Darby still plans on climbing Mount Everest, despite not being an experienced climber, and despite the fact that many people die attempting to do that every single year, but it's Darby Allin. The man is legit more carefree about walking a tightrope of death that's covered in grease, wearing slippers made out of melting ice, than anyone I've ever seen in my life. And what can we say about Christian Cage? The man is on the run of a career at the age of 50. This is a Christian we never saw in WWE and is more familiar to fans of TNA from a decade ago. But this incarnation is even more reprehensible than that one, and the fans are eating it up as they should. This whole thing was brutal, but also had some comedy in it, as Cage lost the first fall because of his damn turtleneck. I'm actually disappointed, by the way, that no one in the post-media scrum even mentioned this to him. Wrestling journalism. Anyway, the second fall was the result of Darby taking multiple nasty bumps from the ring apron to the steel steps outside. Most of them because Christian Cage was throwing him down on them. Well, in between flirting, I guess we could call it that, with Nick Wayne's mother at ringside. I will note, though, that Cage protected Allen in one of the spots, realizing he couldn't drop Allen in any way that wouldn't absolutely paralyze him, so he called an audible and changed the spot. The man is a damn professional. He won the second fall by countout, and then we got into the third fall. That's when all hell broke loose, as Nick Wayne winds up turning on Darby, to the shock of everyone, including his own mother. Cage wins by bouncing Allen's skull off the exposed wood beneath the ring mat so hard that Humpty Dumpty even felt bad for Darby. Sting attempted to make the save, but Luchasaurus put the odds in Christian's favor, and not even the Icon could withstand all three of them. It's at this point that everyone pretty much saw what was coming. A vignette appeared on the screen, straight out of some 90s collab between Quentin Tarantino and Robert Rodriguez, who, ironically enough, was the creator of Lucha Underground. Yes, this was the debut of Adam Copeland. Made his debut in All Elite Wrestling. Although he teased being on Christian's side, he quickly nailed Luchasaurus and Nick Wayne with his steel chair, which sent Christian running from the ring like one of JR's scolded dogs. After the match, the crowd continued to go crazy as Copeland shook hands with Darby and Sting. A nice meeting of three unique, quote-unquote, dark characters across 3 generations of pro wrestling. As I said at the beginning, AEW has taken a hit in the numbers since the whole CM Punk experiment crashed and burned miserably. This is one of the few pay-per-views I can remember where one side of the arena was kind of empty. In fact, when Copeland comes out to do his WWE entrance, you can see him hesitate before going to the other side because there's no fans there. A moment that every single WWE sweaty has replayed over and over again while rolling around their floor, cackling in their bloodline pajamas. To be honest, though, Seattle hasn't been a hotspot for pro wrestling or sports entertainment for that matter in a long time. It's much like my hometown of Baltimore, a city once known for having a booming wrestling audience that is drizzled over the decades down to just another city. Even with 3 hometown boys, Allen, Strickland, and Danielson, in high-level matches, they still only drew just over 6,000 fans. Not to mention that there's a still slight xenophobic attitude from a large portion of the Western wrestling fan base towards Japanese wrestling, either out of ignorance or simply out of spite to Dave Meltzer. Regardless, a tribute to Antonio Inoki should have been a bigger draw among actual wrestling fans if the history of the business wasn't so disrespected by certain people who gained power over the whole industry with little care for any of its history that didn't happen under his own logo. But that's a story for another time. For this night, AEW once again hit it out of the park with one of their pay-per-views. 7 a year is a bit much to ask from fans, perhaps. With each event costing $50, I mean, that's $350 a year. It isn't going to break the bank, but it is a bit steep when you consider you can get everything from WWE or New Japan from around $110 to $150 a year. Tony Khan stated that this pay-per-view will return next year as the schedule continues to grow. Some fans may hate it, but even in the presser, Khan showed that he is a businessman at the end of the day. Wrestle Dream, from early estimates, probably had about around 100,000 buys, which puts another few $1 million in the coffers of the organization. AEW, I feel, is hampered by the recent backstage drama and a general desire amongst the internet wrestling influencers to decry and over-examine every little thing that goes wrong on the show and blowing it out of proportion. There was an incident early on where Inoki's picture accidentally fell during the pre-show presentation, and all the sociopaths on social media just were hyping it up as some huge thing when it really wasn't. All of that will fall away in time, but the one thing that hasn't changed and won't change without some effort is that part in the middle. Again, this is probably better for another video, but there's always great excitement when a feud or an announcement happens in AEW for an event that's going to happen, and then there's a lot of satisfaction in the event itself. It's that part between those two parts where there's a big hole that may be affecting the attendance of these shows more than we know. Hopefully Tony Khan will lean more on people like Adam Copeland, who in the pro media scrum said that he enjoys the storytelling aspect of wrestling. And yeah, maybe Tony Khan can lean on him a little bit more now that he's not relying so much on people who are there mainly for their own egos and wanted to take over the company more than contribute. Anyway, let me know what you guys thought about AEW's Wrestle Dream 2023. Let your voice be heard in the comment box below. And until next time, I will see you guys here for more news, rumors, and reviews on the Rantin Review Pro Wrestling. Have a good day.